This meeting has been held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public past obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meetings protocols, including the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received an invites to the meeting. So with that, can I pass this through to Diane to go through roll call declarations of interest and apologies. Diane.
We have an apology for absence from Fiona MacDonald and also from Councillor Nelson. We'll now move to the attendance roll call before proceeding to declarations of interest. Can the following members please indicate if they're present at the meeting either in person or remotely? Councillor Armstrong. Present in the chamber. Councillor Brennan. Present in the chamber. Councillor Clockerty.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Hellier.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Maguire. Present. Councillor McVeigh.
And chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present remotely.
Councillor Robertson.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson. Reverend Burt.
Present in chamber.
Mr Docherty.
Present in chamber.
Reverend Donaldson.
Present in chamber.
Miss McEwen.
Present remotely.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Can we move along to the agenda, which is agenda item number 7, which is education revenue budget update, and I'll ask Ian to start us on that. Ian.
Thank you, Vina. So this is the education revenue budget for 24-25. Education revenue budget is currently at 115.3 million, and the latest projection is an overspend of 120,000 or 0.1% of the budget. And that's an increase in expenditure of 136,000 since the last committee. The main areas to highlight are an underspend of 224,000 for employee costs, most of which relates to teachers' expenditure, and the expenditure on that has increased by 206,000 since the last period. There are overspends of 299,000 for early years partner providers, 269,000 for catering provisions, and 219,000 for transport costs. School meal income is over recovered by 138,000. And that includes income of a one-off nature from the Scottish Government to write off bad debt. There's also an over recovery of income of 100,000 for placements within the ASN schools. All of the main variances are detailed in section 3.3 and also appendix 3 in the report. Section 3.4 and appendix 4 provide details of the earmarked reserves. The expenditure is currently 100% of the phase spend, and it's 91.9% of the expected spend for the year. No violence are being requested this committee side. So committee are asked to note the projected overspend of 120,000 for the education part of the committee, and also note that that is partially offset by 51,000 underspend for the communities part, which was reported earlier today. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ian. I'm going to open for questions. I can see Pam first and then Tommy. Pam.
Thanks, convener. Yes. Can I ask if there's more information about the overspending catering provisions? I note that it's 200 projected 269,000. I've looked at the bottom of page 50, which confirms that projected overspend, noting that the pressures is likely to be partially addressed in the current financial year by additional Scottish Government funding. Now, my memory may not be right, but I think that last year, well, the previous financial year, 23 to 24, we had £500,000 overspend in catering. And at that time, it was within early year services. It was in the preschool sector. But I suppose my questions are, do we know where this is? Is this the same? Is this in the same sector, or is this, somewhere else? I'm concerned about it because it was, £500,000 previous financial year, £250,000, well, plus over £250,000 this financial year. I'm not clear where it's coming from, and I suppose, and I had a notion that audit were going to be considering this, but I don't know if that's happened, or now I don't know if anybody can answer that. But I suppose, in summary, I have a concern. I'm worried that it's a year-on-year repeat, and all told, that's £250,000. I know where the previous overspend was located, what sector it was located, and I just wonder if there's more information committee can have about this projected overspend. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Tony to come in first of all, if that's okay, Tony, with an overview.
Through you, convener. So the increase in catering provisions is a combination of factors, but mostly down to the increased food costs. So the budget, the pressure has gone up because of increased food costs, and also the universal school meals. So we're actually providing more meals, and the meals are more expensive, and the ingredients are more expensive. However, we are undertaking a review of catering at the moment that does look at catering provisions, and you'll see that it's actually offset by an increase in income as well. So we are working to try and reduce the costs or reduce the overspend, but it has been right for a number of years. But the review itself will look at. Sorry, I think we're frozen. I think the review itself will also be looking at early years provision as well, because we're providing so many more meals in early years than we used to. And that's part of the reviews to look at how much. So, for example, we're maybe providing 40,000, for example, we're now providing 180,000. So you'll actually see an increase in provisions from that. But we are undertaking a lot of work just now to look at to see where the major increases are, that hopefully we will start to see a reduction in that in some time, but also the increase in income is important. As we bring more money in, we should be seeing a reduction in the provisions cost.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Ian, you get in?
Just through you can just add, you asked the question about the internal audit. That piece has been carried out by internal audit, and I believe it was at possibly the last audit committee.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
I'm going to bring Paula in. Paula's online. Paula?
Thanks, convener. Under 3.3K, the overspend in early years partner provider payments. Do we know why there's a higher than budgeted number of placements in private nurseries? Is that a deliberate, that the authority are placing children in those nurseries, or is that parental choice? And is the actions that are in that last sentence, the actions to address this, is that to address the underspend in early years employee costs or the placement in private nurseries? And if we address the underspend in early years employee costs, but the placements to private providers still stays at that level, does that mean that that overspend will increase next session?
Okay, I'm going to bring Ruth in first of all. Ruth, okay, give it a corporate view.
Yes, so we work in partnership with any of the early years partners who meet the requirements, and it is parental choice. So if a parent produces any provision, then we will go with that. So what I would say is it is very difficult to predict. There's a balance between local authority run provision and partner provision. Ideally, the two would balance each other out. But as we all know, it's not quite that simple. If one child moves, it doesn't mean that you can reduce your staffing in another area. So yes, we will keep looking at this, Paula, and we will keep looking at the balance between partner providers, local authority providers, because if the balance shifts consistently, then we will keep needing to look at that to avoid overspends.
But I think for policy-wise, I think we can assure you that there's no drive to put people into private provision rather than council provision, Paula. You would expect me to say that, but they're certainly not. I'm looking for any other questions. Oh, sorry, Paula, I'll let you come back. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's grand. Yeah, I was just giving you a thumbs up.
Right, okay. And I'll bring
Thank
Tommy
you.
in. Tommy.
Thank you, Convener. I went 3.3 as well. Item A on that, there's 8 points listed there. 4 of 8 are overspends due to not making our turnover targets. So I'm looking for some details on why that's happening, and also will this roll over into 25-26 and impact the budget there?
Yes, Ian.
Through you, Convener. The turnover saving is simply that you expect people to leave their post and not be replaced for X number of months. So if you've got a small department with only a couple of people in it, you've no ability to make that turnover saving, but there's still turnover saving against that post. The likes of even the corporate director's post does get turnover saving, so you're always going to have that post filled. And the same goes for teachers, that you're always going to have a teacher in front of the children. So if somebody leaves, you'll bring in a supply teacher, so you're really limited in what you can do with turnover saving in big chunks of education, and that's why these areas are not making their turnover saving.
So will that impact the budget next year then?
There's also a turnover saving every year in the budget, and I would suggest, it will still be an issue going forward, that to make the turnover is always difficult in education, just with the nature of the service. A lot of the posts are legally required. A lot of nurseries got to have X number of ICOs to be open, etc. Teachers need to be in front of the children. So I would say going forward, it probably still will be an issue.
Okay. Just to say, Councillor Wilson has joined the meeting. Welcome, David. Your attendance is noted as well. So thanks for coming in. Do we have anyone?
Convener, could I please declare an interest in agenda item number 17? I shall leave the chamber then. It's concerning school transport, and the committee I chair at SPT controls school transport in the west of Scotland. So I shall leave the meeting, Convener.
Okay, thanks for that, David. That's been noted. Is there any other questions on this item? If not, can we move to the next item, which is the capital? Right. What's on the second? Yeah, sorry. It's on a separate paper. Can I ask Eddie to kick off on it? Eddie?
Yep, thanks, Convener. The capital programme report, the usual focus on the life cycle programme. Within the life cycle programme, we've identified to date, that's included and summarised in Appendix 2. We've also reviewed the kind of PPP skills programme, and that's started and ongoing. In terms of artificial pitches, we're not projecting to do any work in this kind of current financial year, because most of the pitches have had an investment over the last 5 years and had their carpets replaced, although we will be reviewing that life cycle plan this calendar year. Active panels, we have a number of schools to be included in the refresh in this financial year, and those are also noted in Appendix 2. Just touching on net zero, we have a few projects that align themselves with net zero. We're looking to take forward a re-roofing project at Gibbs Hill Children's Centre, and we'll include photovoltaic panels within that roofing project at the same time, and that will also improve the fabric performance of that building. We note there on the insurance fund, most of the damage caused as a result of Storm Eowyn has now been completed. Two projects still to complete, and those are the high-level roofs at St Mary's Primary School and St Michael's. St Michael's work's ongoing just now, and we're programming St Mary's for later in the calendar year. Just a wee note touching on reinforced aerated autoclave concrete, and that's relevant to the project that we're doing at St Michael's, where we're going to replace a section of that as part of the storm damage work. We've also got a small section of the roof at St Michael's we're looking to replace this financial year as well, and as part of the ongoing management strategy for that facility. And just a wee last note on sufficiency projects. There's a few of these at the moment, and that these touch on reports that have already come to the committee on pressure areas at Craigmallach, the relocation of Nest, formerly Thrive, from St Michael's to Lomond View, and obviously some expansion at All Saints Primary School in the communication and language base there as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm going to open up to the room for any questions. Can't see anything on the room, can't see anything online. Eddie, just one very quick question for me, and it was just a question I was asked last week there. We know, we've heard earlier on the agenda that we've done LED lighting in our pitches, and it was the Scottish Football Association that done it. We know we're trying to move towards net zero. Yep. What percentage of our primary schools have got full LED lighting inside? Is it something that you're just doing systematically as we go along, or do we have a target for that?
Yeah, we do have a tracker for that, convener. So we probably started doing LED lighting as standard probably 6-7 years ago, and through the refurbishment projects, but maybe even beyond that. We have had a number of projects to replace partial LED in some of our primary schools that were earlier refurbishments. So at the moment, I'd say across the estate, we're probably about 60, 65, 70% already LED, and we've got a number of primary schools to work through, and probably our earliest new builds, we have to go back to those. So there is a programme, and it's being considered as part of the kind of life cycle work that we're doing, and we'll do a proportion of those every year until we get to 100%.
Well, thanks for that, Eddie. I probably should have known that, but thanks. Do we have any other questions? Can we agree the paper?
Agreed.
Can we move to agenda item number 9, which is the CDIP plan group?
So this is the annual refresh of the CDIP, the Curriculum Development Improvement Plan. So in Appendix 1, you have the 24-25 action tracker. You then have a refresh plan with the policies and the KPIs, and also the committee risk register. The committee will appraised of the format now, so hopefully it's what you'd be expecting to see. One thing perhaps to discuss with you about the KPIs and the targets, and that's on big page 83 for the moment. What I would say is we've perhaps been over ambitious in our target setting. Now, we work with stretchings and Scottish Government, so it's good to have that element of ambition. But also, when you're actually looking to see your marginal gains, perhaps it's not so useful to see lots of reds having missed your target. But if we look at some of the targets we've set, you will see that probably they were very ambitious. I'm just looking at perhaps the total tariff score, where our family average was 829. We were sitting at 862. Good news. Scottish average 917. We'd like to be around the Scottish average, but we'd set a target of 950. So the target was extremely ambitious. So you'll see we've changed the way we're doing that to meet or exceed Scottish average, and that does not mean a lack of ambition, because with the levels of deprivation in the Clyde, you would expect us to be sitting with our family group, not necessarily at national. So we do see that being thereabouts with the national gives us an element of ambition, given the area of deprivation we serve. There is some good news in this, some areas where we would like to be better, particularly in the total tariff scores. We'd like to pull those up. But I know that Michael's got a very, very comprehensive service improvement plan that's looking at that. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ruth. And I walked up to any questions. Elizabeth.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks for that particular narrative, because it does sort of set in context why that we have set ambitious targets and we're maybe not quite met them. I'm just wondering how that feels for everybody. Does everybody in the system know that story, or does that start to make people feel, oh, we're not doing as well as we that's my first question. I probably get two, but is there a point where that becomes sort of an issue for morale, etc.?
I suppose part of it is to do with the format of the actual report as well, because if you set yourself an ambitious target and you've still improved but you failed and it was red, then yeah, there is a sort of morale issue there. What I would say is with the stretchings, it's good to be ambitious. My own personal way of working, and I think probably in our schools, is marginal gains. Here's how we can get 1% here, 2% there, and that's how we've undertaken a lot of our school improvement. But I think the matching ourselves against the Scottish average is a nice way to do it, I would say, because actually if the whole of Scotland goes up, we should go up too. If the whole of Scotland goes down, we should go down too. I'm not seeing any, unless Michael can tell me of any particular morale issues with the schools. They know their children well, extremely well. They know what they need to do. They know where they want to get to, and they'll put in the mitigations with the young people to get there. And that's with attendance, health and wellbeing, as well as academic achievement as well.
Thanks, Ruth. Elizabeth?
Thanks. I suppose I just wouldn't like to think that because it was red and it showed up as red, it felt like a failure. Do you know what I mean? In that context. Can I ask about tariff scores? When we get our briefing every year, the slide that upsets me most is the one with the long lines of the range of tariff scores, and then the kind of circle of what the average is, and the circle is always generally kind of going in the right direction, etc. for the 10 deciles, but that range still hits the bottom for some of our deciles, which means that some of our young people are leaving school with no tariff points. And bear in mind, tariff points we know are about the academic subjects and attainment. There's attainment and achievement. There's achievement and attainment that can both be captured in that. And so that's the measure that always upsets me most. And I know it's not for every, by any stretch of the imagination across the board, but when we know that there's somebody who's hitting that bottom, it does upset me. I'm just wondering what our thoughts are.
I'll bring Michael in first of that. Sorry, but okay.
No, for you, and absolutely, I know that's always a question that you draw attention to. I mean, certainly what we are doing, have been doing over a number of years now, is absolutely tracking and ensuring that nobody's leaving with nothing, and that we're trying to push to develop that creative curriculum that's more diverse to meet the range of needs, to ensure that there are opportunities for achievement and success. I mean, later on in the other agenda, Sam's and Quality report, I was going to highlight to you, for example, a recent project we had with Babcock's, where we saw 10 or 12 young people gain access into a modern apprenticeship that had that innovative approach not been there, based on the level of qualifications that they did have. And whilst they had a level of qualification, this course gave them a stepping stone into something that I believe is transformational for them. So we do absolutely track to ensure and flag to schools or check with schools that they have a line of sight on youngsters to ensure that everybody leaves with a qualification.
Ruth, you want to add in?
Just to come in, so there's the senior phase pathways, so looking at the different options for the senior phase pupils, but also work Michael was doing around the virtual school as well, where young people find it very difficult to access education, and actually making sure we're able to reach out to them and ensure that they get as much as possible.
Okay, Elizabeth.
I know how hard everybody's working on this. It's the one metric that really bothers me. But
can I bring Paula in? Paula?
Thanks, convener. So just on the morale issue, I think this is a strategic paper, and in classrooms, teachers are concentrating on individual pupils and their individual milestones. this is only a measure of some of the things that happen in school, and teachers are seeing achievement and attainment every day that maybe isn't measured and isn't reflected in these figures. There's a lot more in schools to raise morale than the figures that we've got in front of us, if that's some reassurance. Right, Elizabeth?
Right, thanks, Paula. Do we have any other questions on this? Can't see it. No, Tommy, sorry, it's the lights.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm looking at the risk pages on page 90 there. I'm going to ask the ASA, but I'll ask it now to the Department of Risk, make sure that's okay. Now, if you look at the risk of inability research provided with complex needs of the ASA children require. Now, one of the potential causes is increasing costs and potentially having to move staff from mainstream to AFM. So I'm looking at it, I've listened to the director over a period of time and Michael as well. And within the resources we've got, is there the risk that we're trying to do look at one to death and not the other, and eventually, because we don't have enough resources, we're not going to succeed in either. And I'm interested to hear the Paula's views on this as well. I'm just wondering, we can't do everything, we want to do everything, and that's the right thing to do, but is it basically down to resources? Do we need more resources? It is a risk, and it's very considerable risk, and I sympathise with officers absolutely on this because it's very difficult and it isn't focused. I'm just wondering which views are in perhaps the EIS as well.
I'll bring that in first.
So at the last Education and Communities Committee, Michael had some two very comprehensive papers about the growing need for specialist ASN provision in particular. And so what we've basically done is increase the amount of allocated specialist places, and that does come with a higher pupil to teacher or a lower pupil to teacher ratio, so we have fewer pupils in front of the teacher because of the specialist nature. So that will put pressure on us. So if you have normally one teacher with 33 young people in a class, and then you have increasing additional needs where it might be 5, 8, or even smaller than that, then of course, you know, you do the maths, you're going to need more teachers. The Scottish Government are aware of this. They have given local authorities additional money for the ASN. That will only go so far, especially when you're talking about teachers' salaries, which the majority of the resource we would spend. What I would say is the presumption of mainstream, which we would have had 10, 12 years ago, is perhaps now not the context in which we are living so much, and there is a much greater focus on trying to get specialist placements for children with ASN, and over the whole of the country that people are looking at that, and I know the Scottish Government will be doing some research on that presumption of mainstream policy to see if it's still fit for purpose. But as you get more specialist provision, the resources you've got, and we currently do have enough resources, have to be used in different ways. If you're asking me if there will be a tipping point, possibly in 2 or 3 years, possibly, very possibly, not only with just teaching staff, but actually the space for the young people as well. At the moment, we're monitoring, young people as they come through. It's very difficult to tell if young people at the age of 2 are going to need that specialist provision even when they're 5 and they're entering primary school. But Michael's got a team looking at that to see how we're going to meet the needs. But if you're taking more teachers into ASN, there's less teachers for mainstream. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks for that.
I'm looking to see any other questions. Sorry. Paula, oh sorry, Paula, I see you've got your hand up. When I'm looking at you and Tommy, I'm looking directly into the sun here, so please forgive us, Paula.
It's all right. It was just because Tommy had asked for the teachers. I suppose I should be really clear that I'm not here representing EIS. I'm here as a representative of all of the teachers in Inverclyde, although I obviously have an EIS hat on. We're very aware of the ASN issues. You'll know about the EIS's Stand Up for Quality Education campaign. ASN is one of those threads. But we absolutely welcome the steps that have been taken for August 2025 in Inverclyde. Not only does it mean that we're going to get it right for more of our young people because this specialist provision is available for them, but that will also alleviate pressure that is in mainstream, because if these young people aren't coping, it means it gives them, the mainstream schools, the space too, and it maybe provides resource in mainstream that would otherwise be, I'll use Michael's words, pivoted towards the young people that need that specialist provision. So we will always say that more can be done, absolutely, but we welcome the steps that have been taken so far.
No, thanks for that. Thanks for that input, Paula. And if nothing else, can we agree the paper? Can we move on to agenda item number 10, which educational standards quality report 2024 to 2025. And Michael's going to take us through this. Michael.
So through this is, as you see, the standards and quality report for the period April 24 to April 25, and it reports back to committee the work of the service improvement plan that ran during that period of time. Obviously, the document itself, which is in the appendix to the report, is a lengthy one, and I have to say, to the team's credit, we are the writers of this. I'm simply the one that reads it together to make sure it makes sense and reads if I did write it myself. But it's always a huge pleasure for me to be receiving those updates for the year as to where we've got to with, I have to say, a huge amount of work. So potentially, unlike other local authorities, we do report regularly on the actual plan, so you can see what progress has been made in relation to that plan, and by and large, we've achieved a huge amount through that planning process. It's, as I say, it's a lengthy document, it's a statutory requirement, and there are many positives within the report. But what the report also does per section is identify for you the areas that we've identified as being priorities that will inform the next plan, which is currently being written, and that will come to committee in September. One of the things, there's a number of things I might highlight to you that I'm very pleased about. The report doesn't shy away from some of the challenges that we face. So picking up on Councillor Lee's previous question, what Ruth was talking about in the section related to getting a Every Child, we've committed, as I think I reported at the last committee, to devising a really clear strategy for ourselves and everybody about ASN, which will be around both the identification of level of need forecasting, it will be around the vision itself, it will also be around our training offer, continuing to support and upskill our staff in meeting the level of need that we have in Inverclyde. And I'm particularly pleased that page 112 with the level of performance of our schools. And I'm quite confident about what I'm reporting to you in terms of the self-evaluation of each establishment. We've broken that down by sector and tried our best to compare it to what we can find in terms of a national sort of average, if you like. And the performance of our schools at both formalised inspection, whether that's Education Scotland, Care Inspectorate, or our own very rigorous ongoing peer review is high. And what we're tending to find when we have been in and reviewed a school collaboratively and validated their self-evaluation, then that's tested usually shortly after through formalised inspection process. There's a match, and I'm pleased about that. And the evolution of that process, what that has developed within the confidence within the senior leadership teams within our schools and also our central officers team is really, really heartening. There are obviously within the section B, which gives you more detail in relation to attainment and achievement. We've picked up on some of this, but there obviously remain ongoing challenges. I can't emphasise enough to committee the absolute ambition and drive of every single head teacher in this authority, every single head of early years establishment in this authority to get it right for every child. For example, the board who's on the call now has, over the last 2 years, championed and led tracking processes and systems within our early years establishments, and that is, for anyone that understands, that's not an easy feat, and we're really beginning to see the benefit of that cyclical process in terms of how that's helping to support further the identification of the need, the closing of the gap as soon as we can when youngsters start with us. There's a number of different significant achievements in here that I'm reporting to you. It's so pleasing, for example, to pages, Ruth calls it 120, page 17 of the actual Science and Policy report, the fantastic work of the Clyde Music Service, which has obviously been referred to previously, but also just to note on the previous page, on page 16, so an update to you as we come to the end of a cyclical period of additional resource we've had in the authority, partly funded by the Service and Education Scotland, in relation to the RAISE project, which is a project around advancing and promoting STEM education right across in Clyde. And just a shout out and credit to Jolly Neeson, who's one of our teaching staff who's been in that PT role like this, who's really got a passion and has driven a lot of work in and around STEM. And as she leaves that post, because the funding comes to an end, she really is leaving a legacy both in terms of a real appetite in schools to achieve a quality offer around STEM. And it's pleasing to note that one of the schools that she's worked with, Kiln Home, has achieved a significant award, which is a STEM Nation Award. They're really given out, and they have achieved that. So again, another highlight for us. The last one that I wanted to talk about in a little bit more detail has been the work in and around the Section D, which is an ongoing drive that we have to ensure that all of our young people who are leaving school are leaving up into a positive destination, and not just a positive destination at the point of leaving, but there's sustainability to that destination. And again, we've had some additional resource within the central team for almost 23 months, and Gavin Brown's come to us on secondment from South Lanarkshire Council, and Gavin's brought a huge focus and drive in this area, and has been a key figure in ensuring that not only do we maintain high levels of positive relations at the initial point, but the following figures, which are the follow-up figures, which give you a better sense of the sustainability of those, are seeing an improvement as well. And he's been instrumental in the work that we've done, which is outlined in page 39 of the Standards and Policy Report. At the top of that page, that work with Babcock West College Scotland, partnership work between the service, schools, the college, and companies such as Babcock. And that really targeting, went back to Councillor Robertson's point about young people who did have a challenging time through secondary school, potentially were not always attending school as they should, or achieving what they might. But this very tailored, ambitious project has really supported these young people to come into this space. They attended, they were really rejuvenated and enthusiastic. And I have to say that the support that Babcock's provided was really fantastic. And that's a project that will now continue, and it will go beyond the project there. We're working with them in other areas to extend potential apprenticeships. So there are 10 to 12 young people there who are going on into potential career that, had we not done this work, that may not happen for them. So there's a lot of fantastic work reported. There are clear next steps for us to continue to improve, and I might pick up on some of those again later in the report regarding the thematic inspection that we went through in October, but I'm happy to take any questions.
No, thank you very much, Michael, and it's a very, it's what we do, it's what's in this paper, so there is an awful lot of information on it. So I'm going to open up to questions. I've got Councillor Wilson first online, so I'm going to go to David first. David.
Thank you, Convener. I think, like you, this is a very encouraging report. I notice things like RAISE, STEM, and what we're doing with Babcock. I think that there is such very good work in this. I think it seems to me as though Scotland as a whole has woken up to the fact that in terms of PISA results, we are kind of like 30 odd in the world. England's 14th, and that is totally unacceptable. We should not have a worse academic record than England. But the sort of things contained in this report, if this is generated throughout Scotland, I'm sure will raise the standards that we've got. The Convener.
Thank you, David. I don't think there was any questions there. I think it was mainly just a comment. I'll open up for any comments or questions. I've got Francesca next. Francesca.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, so that, you know, Michael, thanks so much for this report. There's so much in it that it really runs the whole length and breadth of so much of what we do. So I think really for me it was, we could pick out anything as a success, but I think it was what you were saying there really about the positive destinations. Just that's great to see that, and I think that's you mentioned yourself, we talk a lot in education about next steps. And I suppose that's what this really is about preparing young people from the earliest possible stage to go into some really positive next steps. So that's great. And I think I met some people recently, actually, it was at our incredibly successful Highland Games. I bumped into quite a few families, and two of them, I think, are moving on, their young people are moving on to closer links with Babcock. So it just shows that with this sort of partnership, we can't really do everything on our own, that it's you know, it does take a whole village to get the best outcomes for our young people. So no, thanks very much to everyone who's been involved in this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Francesca. I'm looking about. I can't see any other questions. Can't see anything else online. Just thank Michael for the paper and can you agree the report? Thank you. And again, it goes back to Michael, and it's just for the overview of local and national initiatives. Michael.
So we did a relatively report this time. There hasn't been up until this point of reporting committee any case inspections that have been, but they will come to you in September. On the education reform, there's not a significant or substantive update for you at this point. At 3.4, though, we've got quite a lot of communication sort of struggling around the joint action plan and relationships and media, and I've tried to outline through the rest of the sections, that was 3.4 through to 3.14, a full update on what's coming through. And essentially, there are a number of key points here. One is that in section 3.12, all local authorities are being asked to review the promoting positive relationships policy, and in turn, all establishments will also be asked to do the same. We are hoping that we can do that quite quickly. The aim would be to try and get a revised policy to committee in September, so that is then has been through the committee process, and then establishments can take that forward. But what at 3.14, what we've cited heads establishment on is the need to fully engage their community on that policy. Whilst we don't expect there to be a massive policy shift, it is important that the review is done in a way that ensures there's real consultation with staff and pupils and parents, and that over the next academic year, all establishments will be expected to carry out such a review. And then some good news at 3.15, we have recruited a GME teacher from a climate academy meeting for it hasn't been without its challenges, but we're delighted, although I would say we are still in the process of trying to recruit a teacher at Winhill. So, but we seem to have got some success there. Happy to take the questions.
Thank you, Michael. I've got Natasha first and then Pam.
Yeah, mine was just comments rather than questions, because obviously you're saying on under 3.4 that that'll come back in September, and it'll be quite interesting to see how that looks for our schools and their communities. And just want to say, I'd written a little woohoo next to 3.15 for quite happy, because whilst we're not going to have Gaelic being spoken in every subject, but even the Gaelic school in Glasgow doesn't do, I think this is a really good progressive step forward in providing that here. I know it's been a long journey, so well done to the team. I wish that teacher all the best as they start their journey in the high school.
Thanks, Natasha. Emma.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, can I add a woohoo as well? Yeah, just that the appointment to Inverclyde Academy is very much welcomed and welcomed in progressing, you know, Inverclyde in Gaelic medium education. I have one small question. Are we looking to offer Gaelic medium education to pupils from out within Inverclyde, or are we? Is that not a consideration, or might that be a consideration in the future?
So through you may, a long journey we've been on in terms of development and education in Inverclyde. We certainly currently, families out with the authority have the option to make a policing request into Inverclyde if they so wish. But at the same time, as we've developed our secondary provision on the back of very strong and long-standing primary provision, other authorities such as Renfrewshire and East Renfrewshire have opened for the first time their own primary provisions. So traditionally, we might have seen some families coming from Renfrewshire to Windhill, and there's still a degree of that, but the majority of them will be opting to go into the provision within their own local authority. So there may not be the immediate appetite for it. We certainly be interested to see what happens when those other local authorities get to the secondary end of things and how that then potentially impacts across the West. But I'm really hopeful. In fact, we now have a teacher in London, a teacher, I have to say, hope he's listening, who I'm really hopeful that people will feel the benefit of that for the future.
I'm going to bring Elizabeth in.
Thank you. See if the teacher is listening, he can maybe let me know how to pronounce the Gaelic word for t-shirt, which I've just looked up, because I was thinking about celebrating with my t-shirt over my head, and I was going to say it Gaelic and I have no idea how to pronounce the word. So if somebody could maybe ask him and get back to me, that'd be good.
I think Michael will bring that, he'll take that off.
Thank you. It's good news, it's great.
Can't see anybody online, can't see anybody else in the room. The only thing I would say, this isn't the end of the journey, but right, so we know that it's a step along that journey. So until we get children within Inverclyde wanting to go to our Gaelic vision, which is the next step, as Michael says, we've got an excellent teacher there, we've got an excellent facility. Now, what we want is to make sure we've got the children, the pupils to go along with that. So it is a major step in the journey, but we know we'll still get a way to go as well. And I know our education, as an education authority, I know that we do recognise that. So with that, can we agree the paper?
We
Can we move to agenda item number 12, which is ASN summer provision? Ruth, are you going to start us off on this?
Yes, thank you for that. And we were challenged by yourselves as a committee to ask what more we could do for children with additional support needs during particularly the summer holidays. And through the budget process, additional money was put into this. And that's very, very welcomed. And we've had a staff team looking at the issues, the barriers, and also the opportunities. And I would say, you know, the staff team have been fantastic at digging into what the issues may be. And from my own journey, every time I look at what we are doing and speaking to other providers across the country, the more respect I have for what is currently being provided, because we have been consistent in our message to you that the staffing over the summer has been one of the key issues for this. And that is still the consistent message we are giving. But people are providing a first-class service with those staffing issues year upon year. And we talked about staff morale earlier, and I'd just like to publicly thank those staff who are absolutely making sure that we're giving every people at least something during the summer holidays and the hard work that they put in to make sure that happens. So perhaps if I talk through the journey so far. So we very quickly realised as a group that this needed a strategic look, because actually what education are providing is only part of the package. We also have third sector providing packages for young people. We also have HSCP providing care packages for young people. So actually when we look at all the young people with complex additional support needs, there is a mixture of providers and a mixture of packages. So the first thing we need to look at is actually what we're currently offering, what we're able to offer, and what the families need. Are some families getting 2 or 3 different providers, whilst other families are missing out? So if I take you to big page 161, or perhaps look at what we're doing, and I'll explain to you why we're doing that. We need somebody to have a strategic look across what we're providing alongside HSCP and the third sector. So we're saying that in order to look holistically at this and be able to chair meetings and take things forward, we're going to put in the equivalent of a quality improvement manager for up to 18 months. If we can do it quicker, we will do it quicker. But actually, we need somebody to chair meetings, to get everybody together, to look at the different types of plans, the different type of packages, to be able to get people into a room and to be able to commission services as well on the back of that. So whilst it appears a lot of money from the totality of it, I would say and counsel you that that is money well spent, because we need to know where the duplication is, where the omission is, and we need somebody with the appropriate level to be able to drive things forward. If I go to the next action, we're going to commission some listening events. I think at the previous committee, the surveys, you can only get so far with a survey. We all know the survey fatigue. Actually, surveys sometimes don't ask the questions that families really need to give their answers to. Sometimes surveys don't tell you, yes, you know, in a world, which would you prefer? Provision X or provision Y? They say, do you like provision X? And you can say, well, yes or no. So we're going to commission some listening events. Of course, we will make that as user friendly as possible. But we're thinking that we probably would commission those from outside, out with the HSCP and the council. Holiday service through the third sector, that would be typical. If you look around the country, it tends to be the third sector who run many of the holiday provisions. And remember, Play for All was originally run by the third sector, it came in-house because they had the same staffing problems. And we've hit exactly the same staffing problems as other people do. What I would say in ringing round, the people I've spoken to also say the difficulties they have. Some of them have got across the country 2-year waiting lists for children to access services, and people have they have the same issues in the qualifications versus the registration versus the care commission requirements if the children have significant complex needs and the length of the service, and actually the fact that people need the holidays and they want to take them during the summer holidays when their own young people are there. So it is a complex provision. But we're speaking to some people from the third sector. We know we're in touch with 2 at the moment. One who currently provides in Inverclyde and who could extend the length provision that they give. Currently it's 4 weeks, we could maybe look to 6. They indicated the difficulties of planning for new young people, so we anticipate it will probably be the people who are currently in their service, and that's understandable. The other is with a new provider who works in a neighbouring authority and can provide some specialist service. I have to say the places are very small, but they're the 2 we're looking with. We are open to have conversations with anyone from the third sector who will come and work in Inverclyde, but again, because of the numbers and the ability to run services, sometimes the numbers don't, the economics don't add up for them. So the next one is to look at the stay and play sessions. Last year we had stay and play sessions. We learned a lot along the way. I think the feeling is we offered the offer of as much as we did was welcomed, but people didn't need that. We learned that people booked, and then it turned out to be a nice day, or their children had a little bit of a problem, so then they didn't turn up. So we're probably going to reduce the stay and play. The ASN group are saying just introduce a small booking fee. You know, if you introduce a small booking fee, people are more likely to turn up. And so we could exchange that for, we're thinking, a couple of copies. We haven't done the absolute pragmatics of that yet, but we're hoping we can get there. But there will probably be less. The parents who attended really valued it. Parents welcomed the opportunity to speak to other parents. But we also got some feedback that actually some parents didn't have the ability to stay with the young people, so it wasn't the answer for everybody. We're looking at with IL to allocate additional workers to some mainstream play schemes. So we have some people who have come forward who haven't got necessarily the right qualifications to work with more severe and complex, but have got experience working with young people who are perhaps neurodiverse. So what we're saying is if those young people previously wouldn't have been able to attend a play scheme just because it was too, wasn't as structured as perhaps school. Then perhaps if we put some people in there to help support that, then that would help people who previously haven't been able to access play schemes, access that. That's a moving piece at the moment, and please don't ask me for details because we're just finalising those. Okay. Carrying out recruitment of suitably qualified staff. If you haven't had a personal email from me, then I hasn't had that, then please get in touch because we actually have reached out as far as we can go. Again, we are always on the lookout for people with the qualifications and the experience and the ability to commit to the summer. Again, Brunel Telegraph, if you're listening, rooftopbinks@inverclyde.gov.uk. If you have those, please just get in touch. We will work with you. Obviously, we have to go through recruitment processes, but we are struggling. Without a doubt, we are struggling. When we've reached out to perhaps third sector friends, they're saying they're struggling too. So we can't have their staff. In fact, if we had any staff, they would take them off us to run what they're currently committed to. So please bear with us on the recruitment. So the changes to the priority of the allocations for Play for All, we know that that will make a difference. We should be able to beat that, and that's the out of school holiday childcare. We know that will make a difference to us in the amount of young people who can allocate the service. So we're basically saying that we hope to be able to offer more children, perhaps a little bit less. We had hoped that we had additional staffing hours to make sure the resilience of the service was there, because of course one person goes sick and we're short-staffed. I have to say that we've had since I wrote the report, we've had some changes, so the resilience we thought we put in isn't perhaps there, but we're looking at everyone who applied and trying to get that down, and also working with ICT, because if we're offering a suite of options for parents over the summer, then we're going to try and do the applications for this online. We've had to work at speed with that. The package has been very good, but we've had to pay for somebody to design that package. Underneath that, grid 4.2, it says, please bear with us. And it is actually saying, please bear with us. Designing a priority places where we have got a lot of unknowns will be difficult. Saying to a parent, would you like one day between perhaps 8 to 4, or would you like 3 half days and 2 hours? That can be difficult. Is everybody entitled to everything? We can't keep putting it on top, but we do have to work with families and say, what would you perhaps prefer? And we also need to, this person who comes in and does the strategic overview also needs to look at what else is in place for our family. Because if we have a mission for families, which I think is what's causing some of the issues here, and we've got duplication where we've got some families getting, relatively speaking, quite a big input, then we need to address that. And we need time to work that through. So apologies for the long introduction, but I think hopefully it'll explain what we're doing, why we're doing, how we're doing, and every effort we have made to take this forward.
No, thanks, Ruth. I think that was very comprehensive. I'm going to actually open it up to questions. I've got a number of lights on. I'm going to start off with Natasha first.
Yes, Francesca had to have a
All right, Francesca first.
That's right.
Right.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks very much, Ruth, for this paper, and also the information you've given us to sit alongside it. So really, really welcome this report. I think I've said before at this committee that I spend a small portion of the week working in an ASN setting, just a small portion as well as being a counsellor, but I still couldn't presume to speak on behalf of any young person or family. So I really appreciate very much the sentiment in here about the listening events in terms of the agenda about nothing about us without us, because I think I've tried as far as possible and will continue to do so to meet with lots of parents around Inverclyde, and I have done in recent months that I think, so I want to also maybe point out that there's obviously we refer to in this report the council supports. the HSCP supports looking potentially at the third sector, but also very much want to recognise the generosity and kindness and empowerment of the voluntary sector here across Inverclyde, because I think I've recently been welcomed by Friends Forever group, the Port Glasgow New Parish Pals and the Greenock Otters, and had some early conversations with uniformed organisations like the Scouts and obviously our care experienced young people. And I'm thinking, I know the thing that really stood out from those conversations, from, speaking over the weekly karaoke at Westbourne Church with the Friends Forever group, to, making slime with Port Glasgow New Parish Pals, to a parent that I spoke to, I think, at Greenock Otters at the Waterfront Leisure Pool, who has, I think, supported his child to that swimming club for possibly 40 years. I think what stood out from all of them is looking for support, a breadth and depth and wealth of experience that we can draw from, but also I think just that they were really happy to talk to us and to join in with those listening events and those conversations. I think there'd be so much that we could learn from them. So I think I really, really welcome that part. And I think I would urge, us to leave no stone unturned in finding ways to listen and to support. I think just the other things that I wanted to draw out really were just, I suppose, recognition, as you say, Ruth, of the staff who are already working in this field as well. I think what they're doing just now and recognising the value of that. But as you say, it's that 4.3, it's that in the longer term, as Michael said previously, how can we do more? Where can we do more? What more can we do? That I think we'll continue to look at here. And I think it'll be really, really good to see very much welcome every single thing that's going on just now, but what happens next as well. So really, really appreciate that and everything that everybody's doing. It's big steps forward and lots of things going on already. Thanks very much.
Oh, thanks, Francesca, for input. Natasha.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously welcome this review. I know that we've been talking about this for a little while now, what this might start to look like. But obviously it's only possible because we set aside that £600,000 specifically for ASN, and we didn't allocate specifically to Pontypridd because we wanted officers to be able to professionally tell us what areas it would be best used in. And hopefully this review should be able to help us understand the bigger picture of what's currently offered across Inverclyde, because there is a lot of different provision. And some of it we know, I think most of it we do know of, but it's those little pockets that we need to understand what's there and what can be used, what can be improved, enhanced, and what is it that families need. And it's important for us to understand, and this is the role of us across all of Inverclyde, us to understand the difference between childcare and holiday clubs, because I think there's a bit of confusion there, where the childcare sometimes gets mixed up with the holiday clubs. And I know a few of outlined the challenges both today and previously that we've faced, both finding qualified staff and also staff that are available, because you've outlined yourself there. Sometimes our staff need a break as well, but we are grateful to the staff that do take the time out of the holidays, because they can't take those holidays other times of the year. And even the challenges sometimes for families being able to attend, whether that's because they decide that Sunday and there's an alternative thing that they could do, or whether it's sometimes things happen in the family home, or the child has something happen that throws them off for the day or whatnot. And I'm hopeful that not only will the pilot be a success, but also that the way that this money is being spent. So I've added that, and I've got about 171k plus the not yet knowns. So that's a lot of money, but I'm hopeful that this money being used will be the start of a meaningful journey to provide children, young people with what they need, but also to help us understand the support that families need, that parents need. I think part of what came out from what I've received in my emails is that sometimes it's the holidays are so challenging. So how do we best equip parents in the run up to holidays? But how do we support them throughout the holidays? What can we do to help them? Because it's hard being a parent, never mind being a parent with a child who maybe needs a bit more support. And then finally, regarding a fee, usually I'm quite against charging for things, usually, because I know that is a barrier for people. But my personal voluntary experience in the third sector is that sometimes a little fee, even something like 50p or a pound, does get that buy-in, does get that commitment, so that our resources aren't being, maybe set up and set aside, because not all resources are reusable. So whilst usually I'd be like, don't charge, I think if there's a way of even a wee fee, but I suspect that even if parents couldn't afford that there would be an alternative avenue there. So, yeah, is that for that first bit? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that, Natasha. I'm looking, I can't see anybody online. Oh, Elizabeth has come in and then Tommy at the end, so I'll bring Elizabeth in and then Tommy, if that's okay. Elizabeth?
We really welcome David as well. You know, we're on a journey, we've all come on this journey so far. We know we're not at the end of it, and it's everybody's, I think, appreciating that. It's a way to go, but we're getting there, and really grateful that we've got as far as we have. You know, we all want to go further. In terms of the post, absolutely agree that that's necessary to put the focus on this and it not be, I always use the phrase that you used so eloquently, Ruth, the 51st thing off the back of somebody's desk, and this should not ever be that. So having a dedicated resource to be able to progress things is amazing. I'm just wondering what the ongoing reporting expectations that we should have, just to kind of make sure that we keep the foot on the gas with this and that we know what's happening as things go on.
Ruth?
Absolutely. So this is the last report before summer, and we've got our foot on the pedal for this summer. We wanted to get through the summer of 25 and see how much we could do. But this is only phase one. So we will, so when the person starts, then we're looking at an evaluation of what happened this summer, and particularly around the allocation of places. That's the one where we're going to have to just do as best we can with it, and ask people just to bear with us, because that evaluation will carry weight to what we do the following year. But that person will be looking at the totality of everything, and this will be across the whole children's services as well. So we will be reporting back to committee on where we're going, what we're thinking, what the outcome of the listening events was, what this summer looked like, but most importantly, our plans for the next summer and how we will be working with the families to look at the provision that we can offer, the provision they need, and trying to marry the two up over the next summer. The worry I've got is that actually what does the evaluation of next summer look like? And this post may not be able to take that forward. So actually what we do need to do is look at what the arrangements were to make this sustainable, to make it sustainable in the longer term. What do we need to run this provision? What do we need to allocate the places and to make sure that every family is being seen? So that will be part of the quality improvement management level job, is to actually say what does the service look like. Remember, we do have some core funding as well for this through what we would offer through the Play for All allocation as well. So that will be a whole thing will be up for us. So the bottom line is yes, we'll bring reports back.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Absolutely.
Tommy?
Thank you, Convener. The report's certainly a positive first step as far as I'm concerned. It's straightforward. This issue is Ruth already alluded to, but Convener, I've had some correspondence on this, some questions which you can indulge me, but if I want to long, I'll certainly take them offline. But I'll just have a go anyway, and Ruth can answer what she can. On the first point, and it's 4.2, the appointment of an officer. What do we see the timeline for that, Ruth? And will the parents and carers be consulted as part of that review when as and when it happens?
So we would see the appointment of the lead officer will be to look at what we currently have and what currently is being offered. The consultation, I would say, is through the listening events. So that's what we're looking at. We have a lot of information from the survey we gave out already. We also know some of the feedback we've had when we were allocating places. But the listening events will be the first initial consultation. We will need to do evaluations of the summer, but we'll keep listening. And actually, the surveys for us aren't giving us the richer information that actually we're listening to people with quantitative information needs. So that's why we're actually going out. So the consultation will be the listening events.
Yeah, and just on the listening events, well, you touched on earlier, Ruth, when you spoke, will they be family friendly at times of the day night to allow for people who are not just to attend?
Yeah, and we will not be able to meet every single person's need. Absolutely, but there will be. and we're working with the provider who we hope will do that. We'll make that part of the expectation. But remember, we'll also have an officer in place who can actually email folk out if they don't feel they've been listened to. We know our specialist provisions. We know that young people with the families with care packages, we've got a list of every single name. You know, that person will be able to sense check who we've spoken to and who we may still need to speak to.
Okay, thank you. And on the again, 4.2 talks about working with the third sector and also with IL. Now, is that because of the time pressure and looking at maybe speaking some kids to use what we have in place with maybe putting additional people, or am I wrong track on that?
No, it would be usual for the third sector to run these provisions.
Yeah.
So it's not because I mean, the council would commission third sector to run this type of provisions anyway, and that would quite often be preferable. So it's just who's best to run the provision.
Right. And we'll bear in mind there's a time pressure to get for 2025 for this summer. Is that why we'd be? No, I know we always use them, but
No. We just look at both. We
Right.
basically say, what can we run with our staff and resources within the council? What can we run with the third sector? And that's what we said. How can we maximise the input? Who in the third sector can run something for us? Who in the council can run something for us? Partnership with IL, because they run the play schemes, is an obvious one as well.
okay. And the last one I'll give you is concerning peer allocation places. And I know it's not easy because there's different nature of there. I mean, any idea how we do that, or will that just depend on individuals, and some people may
And
get
that's,
what, some people may be unhappy, or what?
that's absolutely the one that will keep me in head eye over the last in the next few months, because if you look at our allocation of school places, we are years upon years upon years of fair allocations to schools, and there's still challenge. If you look at how we allocate our nursery places, you know, years upon years upon years of that, and still open to challenge. So we're never going to get something that is going to meet everybody's needs, and we can't enter year one with just a priority placing, you know, that absolutely nailed down. We've had some discussions about it, whether or not we ask people for preferences. We probably think what we will do, and it's not been finalised yet, is to ask people, what would you like? What, you know, here are the provisions we've got on offer. What would be your preference? Now, experiences tell us if you have 4 boxes, people will tick every box, because they think if they didn't tick one box, they're not going to get anything, and that might be another thing available. So you've got to, you know, you've got to work with people's perceptions of what they'll get. And I'd be that person ticking every box, you know. And if you ask them the question, you know, do you need transport? You'd automatically put yes, because you might not get it if you didn't ask, but actually you may be able to provide transport. So I think what we're going to do, and Yvonne will probably keep me right on this, is just to say, what would you like? Out of these provisions, what would you like? The difficulty for us is around that whole day versus the 2 hours, because it's the registration for 2 hours is easier to get for various reasons. The second you go to all day, it becomes childcare, and that puts you with Care Commission regulations, and it's a much harder provision to provide. So, and again, you know, we're going to need the wisdom of Solomon to say, is 3 half days for you as a family better than 1 full day? And actually parents differ in that. You know, some parents are telling us, see that 1 day where I know I've got that whole day, that's great, but we can only do 1 day, versus the potential for 3 half days. And we are just going to have to work with families on this. But what we do know is that some parents are getting the full day at the holiday club. They're also getting childcare, and we're also getting some respite as well. And some parents are not accessing any of that service. So we're going to have some people who feel there's an increase, and other people who perhaps feel there's less. But we have to do what we can offer as fair and equitably as we possibly can. And that's probably what's not happening at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, Tommy, thanks for your input. Can't see anybody else. Can't see anything online. Can we agree the paper? Thank you. And can we go to agenda item number 13? And that is increase in sustainable rate for early learning and childcare funded providers. And I think, Yvonne, you're going to take us through that?
Yeah, okay, through you, convener. So the purpose of this report is to ask members of the committee to agree the payment of a reviewed sustainable rate to funded providers for the delivery of early learning and childcare. The recommendations for approval are to increase the rate from £6.32 per hour to £6.56, to agree that this will be backdated until the 1st of April 2025, and to agree that the rate will be implemented for all eligible children aged 2 to 5 years who are accessing an early years place within a funded provider setting. You will see in section 3.8 of the report that in February 2025, Scottish Government published guidance which sets out the commitment to enable funded providers to pay childcare workers at least £12.60 per hour from April 2025. Given this commitment, it's been necessary to introduce an increase during the academic year to the current sustainable rate. You will see in section 3.12 of the report that through the national agreement, all local authorities should apply a minimum uplift of £3.75 to their existing rate from April. And in section 3.15 of the report, you will see that this increase will bring the staffing element of the sustainable rate to £12.60 per hour. This doesn't include an additional payment for £3 per meal per day per child and 58p for the provision of healthy snack. As part of the Council's commitment to provide high quality early learning and childcare, payment of an increased sustainable rate will ensure funded providers can pay early learning and childcare staff the real living wage. You'll see in 4.2 of the paper that the Council are proposing the increase of 24p per hour on top of the current £6.32, which will be a revised rate of £6.56. Based on their current admission trends, the cost of the uplift will be contained within the ELC revenue budget, and if an increase in the sustainable rate is approved, funded provider contracts would be updated to reflect the revised rate. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot for that, Yvonne. I'm going to bring Councillor Wilson in first. David? No, sorry. Oh, he's left the meeting. See when he leaves the meeting, put it in a different colour. Put it in a red. Put it in a red. Sorry about that. Elizabeth?
This is a wee clarification question. If one said £3.75 and the paper says 3.75%, I'm not agile enough with my maths to check which it is.
Sorry, so
3.12 section.
I think it's
Yvonne?
It's is it, check with Mary here, it's 3.75, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. 3.75%.
Yes.
That's okay, Elizabeth.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, thank you. Just me.
I want to say I've not anybody in the room. I've not got anybody online. Can we agree the paper?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we move to agenda item number 14, which is the Education Scotland National Thematic Inspection Local Authority approaches to support the school improvement. Michael?
So through you, convener, this is us bringing back a report to committee that we promised we would bring once we had the National Thematic Inspection report, and the focus of this inspection was the work that local authorities do and their approaches to supporting school improvement. This was a national thematic inspection that took place very early in this academic year. It wasn't one that we had a lot of notice about for the Education Scotland themselves, however. There's a link in 1.2 to the full report, and as part of that process, a team of inspectors from Education Scotland has offered two local authorities alongside associated assessors appointed to Education Scotland, who specifically had a role in central improvement teams. They had that understanding and knowledge of the work of an improvement service such as our own. Obviously, they visited Clyde during that time, and within the alongside the report, there is the report that was produced on the service, and that's Appendix 1 of the report, page 181, which I'll come to in a second. The national report had specific areas that it was looking at, and that's they're outlined in section 4 of the report. The themes are 4.2, 4.6, 4.7, 4.8, and we had to present the report against those key themes, and there were questionnaires carried out with key stakeholders, mainly teachers and central service team members as well. The totality of this is at 4.9, and as you see, there are 7 recommendations that are being made nationally in response to the findings of the report. And if you read the report, whilst it's clear throughout the report, there's a level of variance in terms of some of the offers that are being made, or it could be an improvement of consistency between offers. The 7 recommendations at section 4.9 outline key areas that both the Scottish Government are working on, Education Scotland are working on, and our Education Service is working on. One of the key responses to this has been the establishment of what has been called odds, and there's more on that in 4.16. So all 32 local authorities have been brought together in groups of 4, the name would suggest, and we've partnered with our closest family group of local authorities from the local government benchmark framework. So we're working alongside Western Bartonshire, Western Isles and East Ayrshire, and have been working together since January to share self-evaluation about our services, our approaches, our local authorities, and we've now identified a plan, if you like, to take forward one area in particular that we wish to work on. And in our board, what we've tried to do is set up an approach over the next 6 months, where we will meet mainly online, I have to say, and we will share our frameworks for improvement. So we are breaking down the overall framework improvement to look at, for example, what is our data strategy per local authority? How do you do that? What systems do you have in process? How do you ensure that there's capacity in schools to analyse data? How do you centrally analyse data? How to sharing our practice? Another one is how do you design your continuing learning, professional learning offer to staff? What's the rationale behind it? How do you measure the impact of it? So we've got a plan of action. What we're trying to do as a quad is then match that across to the 7 recommendations, so we can identify how we as individual local authorities and as a group are responding to them. I'm particularly pleased to see in the Education Scotland report the 4th bullet point down, which is the recognition that there isn't really a structured approach to the professional learning for central officers. It's education alongside their quality improvement teams, and there's a recognition that that's an offer now that needs to be developed. But I have to say the learning that's coming from the quad work so far is really quite powerful, and I'm really interested to see what that national professional learning offer looks like. Appendix 1 then is a report on the service, and it's not a report, as you may have recalled, there was it's not an in-year inspection of the local authority and the grades given out here, but there is clearly a narrative in respect of what the service is doing against the 4 themes that are part of the national thematic. And I have to say, I hope you have attended it, but I think it's a big endorsement of the service, the work that we do. There's clearly areas in there where absolutely we will take on board some of the feedback, and what you should see is an open thread, if you like, that where this has been identified and picking that up, driving that into our service improvement plan for next year. So, for example, really ensuring that head teachers fully understand the framework that we do have, what that actually is delivering to them in terms of a universal offer of support, as well as a more targeted offer. And we've done a lot of work since this report came our way to engage with all heads, including a small working group. And our intention is to bring that improvement framework back to you in September to committee, so you have sight of that, so you understand what it is we're doing and how we're working. So just finally, I'd like to say thank you to the members present, and also Paula in the room, because if you've read the report, you'll have noted that there is some good practice identified from within Inverclyde, and particularly practice that's been cited is the way that we do communicate and consult with our trade union colleagues, as well as parents, parent council, GR representatives. And so we're now being asked to contribute to our national sharing of good practice from this inspection process. So happy to take any questions.
No, thanks, Michael. Thanks for that. I'm going to open up to questions. Can't see anything online. That's just interesting. Can we agree the report?
Agree.
Can we move to agenda item number 15, which is the additional support for learning policy? And again, the Michael will take us through this.
You can give update, just sitting there to the hand over to you, Lawrence Riley, online, our principal education psychologist. So this policy, if you recall, first came in front of you back in October 2021, where we tried to, for our own benefit and for the benefit of staff of schools and we tried to put together current policy and approach in respect of the legislation that sits around the additional support for learning, which continues to evolve, and we continue to evaluate against this policy. So now we do a process of trying to identify what within the policy we updated, and as mentioned by Sarah just earlier in her report, the report across to the new template. And within the report, what it does seek to do is identify for readers what the differences in this report to the previous one. So there's Appendix 2, which is at page 236, which highlights what is an update, and there's been quite a significant amount of work done by our inclusion team, mainly led by Lawrence, alongside Barry Steele, our Education Officer for Inclusion, to further develop this policy. And within the policy, try to make it as user-friendly as we can. And again, across page 224, we see a significant amount of policy documentation. There is national policy documentation as well as local authority documentation, which supports schools to implement statutory requirements of additional support for learning policy. I hope that's a warm-up for Lawrence, and I'll invite Lawrence to maybe say anything he wants to about the policy.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, convener. This is an updated policy, as Michael said. The legislative background to it hasn't changed. We still match what we do against the 2004 Additional Support for Learning Act. So you can see that's very clearly up front at the start of the policy there too. But it then starts to move into off of the legislative background and on to the how do we do that in Inverclyde too. So it starts to then reference other aspects such as our GIRFEC pathway, our interaction with partner agencies, also talks about the positive relationships policy and the interface between ESL and positive relationships. Positive relationships will change. I think as Michael said earlier on, there's some movement from Scottish Government in terms of a desire for that to evolve and move on. So in time, that policy or that bit of ESL will move on as well too in the not too distant future. What we then have too are other aspects such as the ESN forum, the ASG, the authority screening group, how we go around planning for our children and young people through coordinated support plans, single agency planning. And then when you come to the third section, it starts to talk about the support organisations that are out there within Inverclyde too, from educational psychology to NEST that was mentioned earlier on, to support in relation to deaf education, communication outreach support too. So the policy sort of moves across those sections. So that the why do we do it, obviously legislative background, the how do we do it, what are our processes, and then what are our support systems too. And finally, it then starts to move on. I think this is every educator's dream, as it were, too. It moves on to reference all of the supplementary policies and guidance that sit around about ESL within Inverclyde too. A significant amount of work has taken place over time that you can see through the appendices at the back too, from our dyscalculia pathway, which is fairly new, to our dyslexia pathway, which has been with us for quite some time, to positive relationships, etc. So it's a one-stop shop essentially for users of the policy to come to find the supplementary guidance that sits around about this policy too. That's me, convener. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Lawrence. Thanks, Michael. I'm going to open up to any questions. Natasha.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see this policy is one that's obviously been updated and is living and breathing, and 3.1 clearly shows the move from SEND to ASM, which is broader than that can be seen through anti-bullying, English as a second language and bereavement being included as part of this. I suspect to know the answer. I suspect the answer to this is the Scottish Government's asked us to put it in. But why we singled out the Skills Clear, there's 100, I don't want to say 101, but there's many different types of additional support needs. So why is this pathway the only one that's aligned here? Is it because the Scottish Government's asked us to put it in it? Just because I'm pretty certain that some people maybe watch this who have children who don't have dyslexia or dyscalculia, and they're maybe sitting there thinking, why is my child's additional support need not extensively outlined? And we'll
Sure.
take that offline if that's easier.
Lawrence, can we bring you in?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, sure. We've got a very robust dyslexia pathway in Inverclyde. It's been around for quite some time, probably about 15 or 16 years too. I think it works particularly well too, and I think it's also something it's something we're to be proud of in Inverclyde. We've done a bit of work with Dyslexia Inverclyde on that too, and the parent body that's there. But I think when you see the appendices, we also reference an array of other different types of additional support needs too, such as positive relationships, social emotional, behavioural needs, which are some of the biggest additional support needs that we have. And if you go to the start of the policy too, we also reference through legislation the array of different types of additional support needs that exist, because the 2004 ESL Act, it did away with the previous legislation in 1980 and 1981 Education Scotland Acts, a very narrow definition of need. Need was really around about diagnostics too, whereas it moved from special educational need to that very small diagnostic type need into additional support need, which was any barrier to learning. So on page 5 of the policy, you can see the list that's taken from legislation, and we added in at the bottom of that it wasn't an exhaustive list as well too, just to reference the fact that bullying, for example, today is seen as an additional support need to that's 25, 30 years ago, you know, it wouldn't have been seen as having an additional support need, but we know that it can become a barrier to learning too. So we do reference across the policy that there is a wide variety of different types of additional support needs too. But certainly dyslexia is in there, and I say a more current aspect is our dyscalculia pathway that we put in around about 6 to 8 months ago too.
Thanks, Lawrence. Michael, you want to come in?
Just to add to that, Councillor Maguire, I think what we need to remember is that dyscalculia and dyslexia are two labels, if you like. Well, I don't mind when we resist that term as much as possible. We as a service, through our educational psychology, have a process of identifying that. But for example, autism potentially is another label, is within the domain of health and not education. Yeah. So I'm inferring what you're maybe asking, but why are maybe there not other references to other additional support needs, but these are ones that we have worked on in terms of how we process determining whether that is a factor in the learning profile of a child.
Okay, so it's more the reason why it's included here rather than other diagnoses is because it's seen as being an educational need versus a health.
But it's more to do with who determines whether that is.
Okay, so it's where it sits under the diagnostic framework. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be done through education, yeah, because the people best placed to do that and most informed are the people who work with the child on a day-to-day basis, which comes through education.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Sorry for that.
No problem.
So thank you.
Any other questions? If not, can we agree to note the paper? And that brings us nicely on to the Education Service anti-bullying policy. Michael, you want to lead in this as well?
So this is the anti-bullying policy from the service. Again, I'm going to defer in a moment to Lawrence, since he has done the lion's share of an incredible piece of work, I have to say, over the last 12 months probably to get this policy to its conclusion. We obviously have always had a policy, but the Scottish Government published an updated set of guidance, the new edition 4.1 of the anti-bullying policy, has been updated in respect of application respect for all guidance that came out towards the end of 2024. So we have responded to that by taking that guidance, and Roberts might say more in a moment about production of this policy. We've done quite extensive work on this policy, particularly in terms of consultation with young people. If anyone follows our Children's Rights Officer on X, you would have seen her reporting on her work across many establishments, seeking their views in relation to this policy. So there's an alignment with this policy with national guidance, and it has been through, as I say, quite a significant piece of development work to get it to this point, including outreach support from Respect Media Organisation. I'll hand over to Lauren to hear the detail.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, convener. Yes, the policy, it's probably about a year late. We delayed it. We got a bit of a heads up that the Scottish Government document, Respect for All, was being delayed. The original plan had been to write this policy and have it ready for around about November. However, we did get the heads up that Respect for All was delayed by a good few months too. So, but we used that time productively, I think, too. And the Children's Rights Officer went out and she spoke to over 300 children and young people to get their views on what should be in the policy too, and to get good quality advice there too. In November of last year, 2024, Scottish Government produced Respect for All, and the policy, as you can see, is heavily based upon that advice too. There aren't many changes. It's an evolution of the previous Respect for All. It's an evolution of our policy development within Inverclyde too, rather than something that's particularly revolutionary. There are some quite significant changes. The definition changes slightly too. It's a bit more explicit when it talks about, if you can see the second part of the definition on page 4 of the policy, it talks about the behaviour does not need to be repeated or intended to cause harm. Also, we've seen increasingly over time advice from HMI when they're out in inspections, an expectation that all accusations of bullying behaviour would be put through the investigation process. Now, a huge majority, maybe majorities, but a huge number of those investigations wouldn't be proven, as it were, too. But advice certainly from HMI has said that all accusations should be investigated, and it's very explicit within the new Respect for All that should be the same policy process that we put through too. So you can see that that's explicit in here. A slight change from the last policy too was it is much more explicit advice from Respect Me also on the status of the policy, on the scope of the policy too. That this is intended for schools and not for early years establishments, because it's thought to be unhelpful now to have children in an early years establishment talking about bullying behaviour, investigations. It's kind of language we don't want to maybe introduce into early years, while still recognising that the key relational aspects that early years education brings to us too. So those are the main policy changes, I would say, from last time. So we're a wee bit more explicit in terms of our definition there too, a bit more explicit in relation to the importance of prevention as well too. The most powerful, as you can see, the most powerful tool to stop bullying is prevention. It's through education too. A lot of work has been done on the equalities agenda within Inverclyde, and this is a bit of a call to continue that. I think something to be proud of too is that we've got a national document here, Respect for All, that actually references Inverclyde as good practice within it too. So it spoke about the work of building racial literacy too, and it cited New York Primary School, which is a fantastic piece of work. So you can see that that's been put into our own policy too, upon advice from the Director of Respect Me. So those are the main policy changes. As I say, it's a bit more evolutionary. It's not kind of complete change to previous policy, and we have training coming on the back of it too. Okay, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Lawrence. I'm going to bring Michael in first before opening it to questions, if that's okay.
Just to finish with, I wasn't sure that Lawrence would say this, so there is a training package that will support the delivery of this, and the expectation is all heads have been briefed that they must now review their own school and establishment policies in line with this policy.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to open up. I'll bring Natasha in first and Elizabeth. Natasha?
I think mine is kind of a comment as such. So, as many of you know here, including officers and colleagues, like I've always been a strong voice against bullying. Bullying is one of the most destructive experiences a person can have out with a home setting at a young age, and these experiences are regularly minimised by some as being someone being too sensitive or being trying to build or even banter. there needs to be realisation that these experiences can go on to have not only immediate but lifelong impacts on people. Eating disorders, low self-esteem and even suicide at points can be a consequence of being bullied. And these experiences regularly go on to manifest mental health issues as people progress into adulthood and onwards. And we need to remember that those that display bullying behaviours at school may very well go on to be bullies in our communities and workplaces. And it is so important that these behaviours are tackled as close to the first incidents as possible, and this includes helping or supporting those who are displaying those behaviours, because sometimes those who are doing the bullying behaviours have got external circumstances that are impacting them and leading to those behaviours, and this should hopefully stop the behaviours and that kind of those impacts in its tracks. And that's why I welcome this updated policy, which will see every instance or accusation of bullying investigated. And I appreciate what Lawrence said about the quite often accusations aren't proven. I think sometimes that can be difficult both for the person who's doing the bullying or the person who's had those behaviours happen against them and the staff and the parents all involved in that, because sometimes these things happen, things like Snapchat, where in a second that evidence is gone, or maybe it's happened in a one-on-one situation where it's a he said, she said, they said situation. So I can appreciate that sometimes that is really difficult, but I think it is really important for our young people to get the support of not only having that accusation taken seriously, but also if there is that support out for the person that's had that happen to them or the person who's doing that behaviour, to get that longer term help and support, because ultimately it does go on to adulthood, whether we like it or not. We are in the middle of a mental health crisis. We're seeing it in our young people, but it's also in our adults as well, and our services are struggling. So if we can try and help as many people at this young age to get the help and support that they need, which I do think this policy will help with, and I welcome the fact that there's going to be a training package for staff to update their policies. So thank you for implementing this. I know this came from the Scottish Government, but I think it's really important that we do take bullying as seriously as possible when it first starts, so that we aren't letting a cycle continue year after year into adulthood.
Thanks, Natasha. I'm going to bring Elizabeth in first. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Camilla. I'm kind of struggling to figure out how to phrase this question. As an elected member, there's a kind of taxonomy of communication that you have with people in the community, that kind of the pinnacle of which is pieces of casework, but actually underneath that you've got lots of conversations and people coming to you just expressing concerns and things. And I think if I'm looking at education and the things that people have come to me with over the years, the concerns, the biggest chunk of concerns in terms of education has been about bullying and how schools, how parents have experienced schools dealing with that. And I'm aware that this is not the first policy that we've had, but Warren said it's an evolution of previous policies that have been in place. And I'm just, what's my question? What is going to make that experience of parents who are trying to kind of support their children in their school context, what is going to be better through what this policy is doing than the previous policies that we've had?
I think there's a wider I think there's two things I would say to that. Firstly, that as Michael referenced, upon this policy will be the expectation that schools will produce their own policy. They'll have a period to do that, but the expectation is that they heavily involve their parent population in the production of that policy too. So there'd be far more co-production at a local level. So it's not just a central policy that's going out. This had some parental input. The expectation is that parents will be heavily involved in that very much at a local level too. One of the asks that came through from the consultation with parents was also that there would be quite a significant level of publicity around about the policy too. So it's not just a policy that we want sitting, resting and waiting for something to happen, and then we go through the investigatory process too. The parents are expecting that there's a lot of publicity, the visual publicity. One of the bits that we got through the consultation was a suggestion that once that we have things like mascots, that we have things like sort of straplines for policies as well too, and the children and parents come up with quite a few suggestions for bringing the policy to life, I suppose too. So I think for the first time we'll have very much school-based anti-bullying policies that have been co-produced with parents too. In the past, we've asked them to kind of follow this policy with a charter which is much lighter touch. But we're actually expecting a full sort of school-based policy. But Respect Me very helpfully have given a template for that, and with a heavy expectation that parents will be heavily involved in that, the creation of that template too.
Thanks for that, Lawrence. I'm going to bring Fraser in.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Just picking up on the definitions been accepted from Respect for All, bullying behaviour can be physical, emotional or verbal, and can cause people to feel hurt, threatened, frightened and left out. I mean, obviously this is a fantastic document. I'm just aware that in our current landscape, a further category of bullying that has been identified as spiritual. And I'm just wondering, I realise that could sit within physical, emotional and verbal, but actually in the landscape which we're in, spiritual has been recognised as a form of bullying and abuse. And I'm just wondering if there is any scope or any thought of that being considered as part of this policy, because obviously that is an aspect of education as well.
Michael, do you want to take that one? Put it to Lawrence.
Lawrence may have a view on that, but I'm happy.
Yeah, it's not something I've considered. However, it is a good point that you make too. And my reference points, the person with not just national but international knowledge is the Director of Respect Me, who's our link for this policy too. So I think it's probably a question that I would put to her and seek some advice upon too.
Thanks for that, Lawrence. Mike, will you want?
I'm happy for the discussion about that offline, but I mean, certainly the protected characteristics are a fundamental part of this policy, and particularly just in terms of spirituality that was the religion or belief as part of, or are those protected characteristics. So that would always be part of this, is whether or not that's given more of a definition with respect to spirituality. I believe it would be covered.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, and I agree with that. I think it's not so much in line with the protected characteristics, but the fact that faith and spirituality can be used to influence people, and therefore there is aspects in which it's becoming more aware now, in which we need to protect against that being the case, and it being used in a form of bullying or a form of influence or power, as opposed to bullying because of someone's spirituality. So it's just a thought process, that was all. It might not be answered right now, but just might be worth considering going forward.
Is that okay? Yep, okay, thanks. I can't see any other questions. I suppose my only comment with it, well, a lot of the papers, what we do is we get Scottish Office guidance, Scottish Government guidance. We'll do it at that council level, and then we'll put it down to our schools. And it's what Mike talked about earlier on. We like a golden thread in this council. So it's that golden thread that we'll do it through the guidelines from Scottish Government, the policy from the council, individual schools policy. We'll ensure that every part of our policy is maintained, but we'll put their own addition in to make it particular to that school. And I think that's the key to this, and it's the key to an awful lot that we do. We'll do it at the council level, and then at the individual schools will have their policy that will make it personal to that school as well. And I think that's what makes Inverclyde quite a special place and a strong place as well. So with that, if we could just note that report, and thank you everybody for their input for that. And now I'm going to do the appropriate resolution to put it into